I have a crush on Angelina Jolie, and like my friends, my other girlfriends were like, well, who doesn't, And
Right.
so it was just kind of like signaling to them that like, hey, something's different about me, but
Right.
like they were like, well, like I'd make out with her too, like she's
Yeah.
hot, right?
Yeah, yeah. I want to get to your coming out story because I think that's something that you do, I'm sure, on a daily basis with a lot of your students that you work with, encouraging them in that because you've gone through it yourself and without the help a lot of times.
Yeah, so in terms of, my coming out story, I think that I realized that something was different, about me, like I said, back in like third or fourth grade,
Yeah.
when I was, attracted to and was interested in knowing, my classmates, one boy, one girl, in
Right.
a deeper way, and like really wanting to like learn more about who they are and just being excited to be around them. um and like I said, that was repressed because of um the silence in the curriculum and the lack of acknowledgement and the lack of validation in terms of
Mm.
like the books we were reading in elementary school. Like there was like nothing back then, like in the 80s, because I immigrated here when I was 7, so that was like 1987.
Wow.
So there was like nothing, right? And so the erasure of LGBTQ folks and their histories and their narratives, I think, kept me repressed in like who I was.
Mhm.
And again, and then like in high school, I went to an all girl Catholic high school. Um, and I always, that was the only time that I was like, oh, like I have a crush on Angelina Jolie, and like my friends, my other girlfriends were like, well, who doesn't, And
Right.
so it was just kind of like signaling to them that like, hey, something's different about me, but
Right.
like they were like, well, like I'd make out with her too, like she's
Yeah.
hot, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
what would distinguish their attractions to Angelina Jolie and yours?
Right. Yeah. And so like I didn't come out in high school either. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess like
So you
at
just kind
least
of conflated that. You just,
yeah,
oh, I'm just like them, sort of,
right,
maybe.
exactly. I'm just kind of like them. Yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone has the hots for her, like
Right.
whoever
Right.
you are.
Right.
And so that was just kind of that phase. And within the Catholic school setting and like teachings about the value system, the Catholic social teachings and things like that. It's all about, it's rooted in justice, it's rooted in
Mm-hmm.
respect, it's rooted in love, right? And so I think going to Catholic school all my life until I went to college, those values of, centering the way that we live our life and how we interact with people, rooted and centered in love,
Mm-hmm.
was really something that I like took with me, right? All religions, like if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, etc., there is this core component of love. And I feel that, you know, um, fallible human beings kind of take that out of context when they create like dogmatic messages about
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQIA folks,
Sure. Like
things
those
like,
maybe more Orthodox Jews or Muslims and Christians.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like when I hear um, religious leaders within the Christian or Catholic community say that, um, like love, love the sinner, hate the sin, or something like that, or
Yeah, yeah. Love the sinner, hate the sin. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
so,
Attitude that's more.
it's
Yeah.
like, what does that even mean? And yeah, and I mean, like, I think I've shared this with you before, but the word
Yeah.
homosexuality wasn't actually found in the Bible, in any of the Bible writings,
Right.
teachings, in any of the books until 1946.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for those who are interested in kind of learning more about that and how the word homosexual and homosexuality was created to be this, this bad thing and this like ungodly thing.
Sure.
It didn't appear in the Bible until 1946. And so the documentary is actually
Coming up
called
soon.
1946.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People
And
should
so
check
it's
it out.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating, like
Right.
how even the hatred for LGBTQ people were created by men, right? And not necessarily by God
Sure.
and,
Yeah.
the higher being and stuff, because the ethos and the centrality of all religions, I feel, is centered and rooted in love. And so
Mm-hmm.
how can you love someone and and quote unquote send them to hell right away because they're LGBTQI
Right.
plus? I mean,
Right.
one of
Right.
my family members, in terms of my coming out, said that, like, oh,
Yeah.
like the Bible says it's wrong, you're going to go to hell, you're not going to be
Right.
saved, like.
I recall that's even your own father, wasn't it?
No, it was
No,
my no, it wasn't my yeah, that wasn't my dad. It was
that
one
wasn't
of
your
my
dad.
it was one of my
Wow.
titas. Yeah, it's one of my titas. Yeah.
Is that your
Um
aunt in
yeah, that's an
Filipino?
aunt. Yeah, tita
Okay.
is a aunt in Tagalog. So
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
yeah, and my dad, when I came out to him, it was like a 7-year process. And
Right.
so different points throughout that 7 years, and I decided to come out to him when I knew that I was going to be financially stable, in
Right.
terms of like that I can support
They
myself
have a safety
financially.
net. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and that was my privilege too, right? Like, as a cisgender person, even though I was, just dealing with other like mental health issues, like in the back of my mind, I knew that my family was gonna be there, and that, me waiting until I can support myself financially, is something that I decided to do, because I was afraid that, like, I would be, I don't know, kicked out of the family or
Ostracized. Yeah.
ostracized, like whatnot. And so I didn't actually come out to my dad until I graduated from my master's program.
Mm.
And that was, I think, in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Or wait, no, six. No, no, that was 2006.
2006. Okay.
Yeah, so I was 26 the first time that I came out to my dad. And just year after year after year, and a lot of just really, like, really rough conversations, in terms of, at one point he blamed me going to American school to,
Mm-hmm.
because he thought that um, the education system taught me this thing, and just kind of
Sure.
trying to find a scapegoat or trying to
Like at
understand how.
university or like
Yeah, the
counseling?
university system. Yeah, so he thought that going to college in the US made me
Yeah.
the way that I am.
Right.
And that, if I were to have gone to college in the Philippines, I probably wouldn't have turned out this way.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so, yeah, and so I was like, oh, that's an interesting
Yeah.
concept. But I also had to understand that even though I was going through my process, I also
Right.
needed to take a step back and try to understand that my dad was going through his process as well.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
finding out and trying to understand, that what being queer meant, and what does it mean for, his daughter, and like his expectations of me, and his kind of the way that he has already written my life, in terms of marrying a man and giving him grandkids. Like, there's a death, right, for him,
Yeah.
and there's a grieving.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, and I can't tell you 100% sure to this day, and I'm 40 now.
Mm.
Came out to him first when I was 26.
Right.
I don't know if he fully I don't know if he's given up the fact that I will eventually end up with a man and give him grandkids, right? And
Yeah.
so, even though I've been out since I was 26 and now I'm 40,
Yeah.
like that's just something that I have to make peace with, right? In
Yeah.
terms of where he is at in his process, and because he needed to do a lot of unlearning. And when I came out to him, I think he was in his 50s or something, like
Sure.
past 50s, and so that's 50 plus years of unlearning
Mm.
the ways that he was socialized and the ways that he viewed the world. And so there's also a responsibility that I put on myself in terms of really meeting him where he's at, and trying to understand where he's coming from and why he thinks the way that he does. But then at the end of the day, I know that he still loves me,
Mm.
although he might not understand, right? And
Right.
so I think the spirituality piece comes
Yeah.
in that sense of like, accepting, and being grateful that he's still here and that we still have this relationship,
Mm.
and focusing on those blessings, rather than just kind of like,
Cutting
I
off
don't
the
know, like
relationship or
cutting off or like canceling. Our cancel culture is huge nowadays. Like,
yeah.
it's not,
It's
I
not
don't
something you
know.
want to get yourself in. I don't either. That bitterness, it's not healthy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I mean, you always come out. I mean, there's family that Filipino families are huge. Like, you
Yeah.
have
Oh yeah.
extended families. It's not just your nuclear family, right? You have your
Right.
titas, you have your cousins. Like,
And
I
just
know.
family friends who are Filipino.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just kind of like a constant, just kind of, coming out or inviting people in, inviting people into your life that will give you a positive energy and will affirm who you are without judgment. And
Mm.
so yeah, so this notion of coming in, I mean, coming out versus inviting people in
Right.
is also something that, because for a lot of people, like coming out, it might not be for them, right? Like maybe coming out is a social construct that white people made, right? In terms of like pride and like you have
Yeah.
to be proud of who you are.
Right.
So versus coming out,
Uh-huh.
I think folks are now also considering inviting people in
Right.
so that they don't have to, they choose who
Yeah,
they
they
want to
choose
invite
to instead
into
of
their
just being
life and
so
their
glitter
authenticity.
loud.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like myself, you know my story. I definitely have my Christian faith, and we have different interpretations, in terms of our sexuality and how we want to live our lives. And I think that's the beauty of it too. Like you said, with queerness, I typically don't use labels. I'm not a label guy, so I
Mhm.
just feel like there's so much of John Chen that is just John Chen, and
Right.
for you, Sharon, of Sharon Claros, that
Mhm.
queerness or gay doesn't really embody, at least for me. And I definitely respect you for being so bold with your parent, with your dad, because that's really, really hard thing to do. And I was so fortunate to have my parents be very understanding. They said it was a phase, like I think
I
that's a
think my dad still thinks it's a phase.
right,
To be
right,
honest with you,
right.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I think I get where he's coming from when he says, "Oh, if you were raised in a Filipino culture," I don't know if he said it in this voice in a derogatory
Mhm.
tone or not, but we were given these opportunities to be able to assess, okay, what is my sexuality like? I probably would not have thought about it as much
Yeah.
if the boys in my classroom didn't call me gay, if I didn't have these media outlets and so forth to show me, like these
Mhm.
different lifestyles I could be living.
Mhm.
And so I did believe in that. I didn't really have my Christian faith at that point in high school, and I lived a pretty average, I would say, life. Still trying to figure my sexuality, my identity out. And then it wasn't until going to college that I took my faith very, very seriously and started understanding, okay, what does the Bible actually say about this topic of sexuality? Of course, we've come to different, ideas of what that means for both of us and what God wants for us.
Mhm.
But I can definitely respect you as someone who identifies as a lesbian, has a partner, and still treats Christians, like myself, and conservative people like your father or your community with respect and open
Yeah,
minded,
definitely.
right?
Mhm.
That's really lacking in our
Mhm.
current generation.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about it is that there have been, like, for example, at the Claremont Colleges we have a queer Bible study that meets, that's
Wow.
started even before I got there, and they're now starting their Bible studies like every Tuesdays, right? And for queer people who
Yeah. That's so
who, you
cool.
know,
That's
is
amazing.
who their religion and their spirituality is a huge part of
Right.
who they are.
Mm,
And in terms of like larger community resources, the metropolitan community churches is very queer friendly. Like I think
right.
queer, like, or a member of the LGBTQ community, their
Right.
pastors, you know, their ministry, like Agape, like International Spiritual Center here in LA too. Like
Yeah.
they have like an LGBTQ ministry, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
it's not like an either or. You can either be like Christian and religious or be queer and like
Mhm.
not have those two identities that are central to who you are coexist, right? It's a both and. You can be spiritual, you can be Christian, you can be Catholic, and you can also be queer.
Yeah.
And those things can coexist, and it's beautiful to see those things coexisting.